Everyone. Oh, Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Consciousness and Healing Initiatives weekly webinar. And we're just so excited to have you, Zev Rosenberg, here today. Zev is a licensed acupuncturist and is recognized as one of the first generation of practitioners of traditional Chinese medicine in America. Before opening his practice in acupuncture and herbal medicine in 1983, he was a shiatsu therapist and macrobiotic counselor from 1975 in Denver, Colorado, and Santa Fe, New Mexico. After several years in the early days of the natural foods movement, he was one of the initiators of an acupuncture licensing law in Colorado, spearheading a drive as president of the Acupuncture Association of Colorado from 1984 to 1988, as well as being a professor and chair emeritus at Pacific College of Oriental Medicine, where he taught for 23 years. He has lectured widely around the United States and has written many articles published in all of the professional English language journals on the Chinese East Asian medical profession. And he presently is the director of the Alembics Institute, an educational institution based in San Diego, and an advisory board member with the Krupp Endowment Committee at the University of California, San Diego Integrative Health Center. He's also a professor at the Academy of Chinese Health Sciences in Oakland, California, in their doctoral program, as well as at Five Branches Institute in San Jose, California, and Yosan University in Marina del Rey, California. He's the author of 4 books: Returning to the Source, Ripples in the Flow, Afterglow, and most recently, A Ring Without End with Stephen Cohen, and numerous articles published in professional journals over the past 40 years. So it is really just such an honor to have you here to talk with our community. And I just would love to ask you, like, how did you decide on Chinese medicine as a career?
Well, first of all, it's an honor for me to be working with you today and speaking to all of you. Um, it's basically a new audience for me, so help as I find my way, things will get more and more focused to the needs of the group. So I just want to make that point. So I grew up in New York, um, in the suburbs of New York City, and I was always suffering with respiratory issues. Part of it was the cold winters there. Part of it was the lack of regulation of the environment and, jets, trucks, cars pouring, you know, smoke into the air, unregulated chemical plants across the water in New Jersey, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, um, and I was also our house was right under one of the flight paths into JFK Airport, which is like a mile and a half away. So, um, it was difficult. So when I reached college age and went to NYU, while I was there and also previously in high school for years, so I read an interview with John Lennon where he started talking about macrobiotics. And then I found out one of my favorite groups at the time, the Incredible String Band, they were into macrobiotics. In fact, they used to go to this restaurant in the Village called the Paradox, which was based on a Neijing hexagram. So I went there and I ate the food and I said, man, this food is so good and so healing and so strong. I've since then changed my ways of eating to a modified macrobiotic approach to healing. So macrobiotics was based on yin yang theory in 5 phases. So right away, I had exposure to some of the underlying theories of Chinese medicine at the time. I also took a copy of the I Ching out of the library when I was 15, the Wilhelm Baines version, and I never returned it. I just paid the fine on it. Basically, bought the book from the public library because I had it so long and I kept looking at it, looking at it. And one day, I got a record from Pink Floyd called Piper at the Gates of Dawn. That was their first record, 1965. And there was a song on it that I really loved called Chapter 24. And it goes, a movement is accomplished in 6 stages, and the seventh brings the return. Thunder in the overcourse of heaven, things can neither be created nor destroyed. And I said, well, I know those lines. Where is that? So I had a hunch. I opened up my I Ching, chapter 24. Sid Barrett, who was then the leader of Pink Floyd, had taken the lyrics right off the hexagram, which is interesting enough. It's a hexagram that's coming up at winter solstice in a couple of weeks. So that
Amazing.
these are all things that propelled me forward in this direction. Also, it was the era, like Bob Dylan once said, he said, what is it was about the 60s? He was asked by an interview. He said, it wasn't about sex, drugs, and rock and roll primarily. It was about cultural exchange, primarily with the East. So it was really the first time that Asian thought really came big time into the West. Through people like Alan Watts, for example, Suzuki Roshi, the Book of Tea came out, all these early books that I got. And so there was an influx, especially I had moved to Colorado, New Mexico, but on the West, the whole Western United States was very much permeated by this new culture, of which macrobiotics was a part. And so the founder of the macrobiotic movement in Japan was named George Osawa. And he actually, I found it interesting enough, taught acupuncture in Paris right after World War II with Georges Soulier de Morant. And he wrote a book called Acupuncture and the Philosophy of the Far East. So I read that book, and that introduced me to acupuncture. Then I moved well, I was already in Boulder, Denver, Colorado. But I met my first teacher, Michael Brofman, who's still practicing in the Bay Area today. And he gave me a home study course in Chinese medicine from Dr. Kok Luong up in Vancouver, and a book called 2001 Points. And I started to connect myself with him and his work. And then finally, I got my first acupuncture treatment. And that was in the early to mid 70s. When I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, after being in the natural food business, for the purpose of studying, first of all, naturopathy. I went to a naturopathic school there.
Amazing.
It was
Amazing.
called the J. Victor Shearer School of Natural Medicine. Then it became the Santa Fe School of Natural Medicine. Now, while I was there, I got all these different messages about Chinese medicine. One was from a Qigong instructor who I knew in Denver, Boulder, who's still around today, Kumar Francis. He said, you should be studying Chinese medicine. You have the aptitude for it. Don't stick just with um, macrobiotics. And then I invited a macrobiotic counselor to Santa Fe to teach while I was in a naturopathic school. And the director of the school, by the way, gave me a book called The Barefoot Doctor's Manual,
Yes,
which
very
was an
good.
early Chinese medicine book. And I invited a teacher named Noboru Muramoto, who wrote a book called Healing Ourselves, which had a lot of information on Asian medicine. One of the first books in English, published in 1973. So I invited him to Santa Fe, and he gave me an acupuncture treatment with gold needles on my back, shoe points. And he said, you need to study the Shang Han Lun, you need to study Chinese herbal medicine in order to really fill out your ability to help people. So, okay, I get the message.
That's
So,
great.
but it took a couple of years to find a program. A school open. Well, there was a school open in Santa Fe at the time, and there's a story behind that, but I ended up not going there. I mean, it's quite an interesting story. But
So,
um,
who have you been some of your teachers and inspirations do you feel along the way?
okay, so I started at a school in late 1970s, 1980 in Santa Fe. My teacher there was Stuart Watts, who presently lives in Albuquerque. He's retired. And we met first at the back of a dojo of a martial arts studio in Santa Fe. I really like that. And then we moved to a small campus. And one of my early teachers and inspirations there was Dr. Ted Kapchuk, who wrote The Web That Has No Weaver. And there
Yes,
were
of
a
course, the
paucity of
class.
books in those days that we actually used that as one of the textbooks.
It was one of my textbooks at naturopathic medical school as well.
Really?
Yes,
Really cool.
at UNM in
And we've
Portland.
stayed close friends all these years.
Such an amazing
It
book.
was actually Ted. He was out here in San Diego for a year or two teaching at the Pacific College of Oriental Medicine because some of his students um, started the school here.
Oh,
So he had wanted to go back to Boston. So they said, well, who could teach herbs? We don't have any herb teachers in San Diego. So he recommended me, and the rest is history. That's how I came here after 8 years of practice in
wow.
Denver, Boulder. So,
So how long have you been in clinical practice, Sev?
well, since 83 full time. So, and because, like I said, before that, I was a shiatsu therapist, macrobiotic counselor. So I would say Chinese medicine wise, I got my license in New Mexico in 1983. So that would be what, 42 years, 40, going on 43.
Amazing. And what have been some of your takeaways just to clinical practice?
Woo! I was laughing with somebody because I have four books out. We're working on a fifth, Steve Cowan and I, and this one is on circadian rhythms, Wu Yun Liu Qi, five movement, six Qi, and the working title is called A Room Full of Mirrors because one part of the body reflects the other part and reflects the whole universe and so forth, and
Amazing.
specific principles in Chinese medicine
Wow.
on how to do that. But I've told people several times actually that I'm like a fish in the sea. I've been doing this for so long that to come up with examples, I require somebody to prod my memory because I have so many
Of
cases.
course, of course.
But let's just say that when I opened my original practice, I moved back to Colorado. So there was no licensing then.
Mm.
There was a very unusual law. I never heard about it anywhere else. It's called the Physician's Extender Law. It's like what I call the hamburger helper law. It's like any layperson could help a physician fulfill medical necessities because
Interesting.
it was a largely rural state at the time, in many ways still is. So I filed with an older physician, a Holocaust survivor who did circumcisions, religious circumcisions, and he filed my paperwork with the board of educate with the medical board. So that was it was I was a registered acupuncturist, but we weren't allowed to advertise. It was all word of mouth.
Wow.
Well, there were a few of us in Denver and Boulder, but couldn't put shingles on our door, couldn't advertise in the old pages. Meanwhile, the chiropractic profession was able to advertise even with 5,100 hours of training. So, and there were accidents, punctured lungs and kidneys and things like that. So soon I became the president of the Acupuncture Association, Colorado. I think we had all of 30 members back then. Now there must be like 3,000 acupuncturists in Colorado.
Right.
And we
Yeah.
went to the chiropractic board and say, hey, this is not cool. This is happening and you guys are advertising. And they said, you know what? Because they were venerable old school chiropractors, we agree with you. We're going to stop them from advertising acupuncture. And they did. But
Wow.
word of mouth got me up to 100 patients a week within a year. And people were
Amazing.
flying from places like Dallas, Texas, and drive in from Western Kansas. It was just amazing. The demand for this medicine was so great. So, uh,
That's amazing.
by the way, naturopathy also started to take off around the same time in Colorado in the early 80s. So, and I knew several naturopaths. Most of them were doing homeopathy as their main calling.
Yeah, I went to University of Colorado Boulder and I studied with Jody Shevins,
Jody,
who was teaching homeopathy, and that was one of the inspirations for me to go to naturopathic medical school.
I uh, I knew her very well. She was a good friend of mine. I even dated her once.
Amazing, amazing. Such a small world, you
Is she
know.
still out at it out there? Is she?
I think so, but I don't know. So, what is your history teaching in this profession? I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
Well, it really started with my first teaching position full time was at what was called Southwest Acupuncture College, which was the new name of the acupuncture school that I went to earlier. And I was started by two students who graduated with me the same year, Anthony and Skaya. So I had decided to close my practice in Colorado and move here to California. but I had to wait a year before I could take the state board exam. So I went down there and I taught, and I had a small practice. So I taught there first. And then after a year or so, that's when Ted Kapchuk gave me the recommendation to start teaching at Pacific College here in San Diego, which is basically what brought me here. And I became the department chair a year later of the herbal medicine studies department. So, and I've done seminars ever since on
Yeah,
and
and
off.
it sounds like just from your bio, I mean, you've taught at some of the, most renowned acupuncture schools in on the West Coast for sure.
We also helped myself and my friend Greg Bantic, Jack Miller, who was the CEO of the campus here, opened a new branch in New York. And I was flown out back and forth with Greg to set up programs at the school in New York as well. So I also had ties to New York. Originally, uh, one of my early teachers was in Chinatown, New York. I went back in my mid 20s for about 6 months to New York and got pneumonia. Like I said, I can't live in that climate. It was still very polluted. So I went to a practitioner in the village and it was not licensed. It was underground in the Chinese community in Chinatown. And I studied a little bit with the practitioner, but he basically cured me of pneumonia. And then after I said, I'm staying out west after this, right?
Right, there you go.
But to try to find somebody, you'd look in the phone book, there was nobody, maybe a few MDs. Now, of course, it's also booming in New York as well. So,
Yeah, absolutely. There's been such a just shift, right? And I think, and this is not just here, but really globally, there's such a massive movement around traditional complementary and integrative healthcare everywhere. It's pretty inspiring.
yeah.
So I would love to just ask you shift a little bit and talk a little bit about how Chinese medicine classics kind of have been a continuing inspiration for your work.
I had an incident, well, a positive incident in my early practice. There was this one lady who used to fly in to see me from Dallas, Texas, all the way to Denver. There was no one in Texas at the time. So, and she just had lower back pain, basically. I mean, I felt honored that she'd fly all the way to see me. And I would do some of the standard treatment, back shoe points, as we call them, and so forth on her. And um, nothing happened, didn't work. So between visits, one time I opened up one of the textbook that I used in school, even though it wasn't the official textbook, because I didn't like my official textbook, which came from mainland China. It was like basically a short course for MDs that they were using as a textbook for acupuncturists. It just didn't make it. It's oversimplified. So there was a book, the first book published by Eastland Press, put out by Dan Bensky and company, was called A Comprehensive Acupuncture Text. It was basically a translation of a Shanghai teaching manual. And it had liberal quotes from the classics. And one of them was that all pain comes from the heart.
Hmm.
I said, that's interesting. So the next time she came, I just did a very simple treatment. I treated kidney 6 and heart 5, the Shaoyin channel, and all the pain went away and didn't come back.
Hmm.
So this is interesting. I'm getting the wrong tack here. I'm trying to attack the problem rather than get underneath the hood and
Yeah.
deal with the patterns that are creating the problem in the first place. Also, while I was in school, became aware of another uh, teacher, translator, practitioner in Vancouver, had his own school, Dr. Henry C. Liu, and he had translated the Neijing and the Nanjing. And so I got a hold of that, although the translation was not good. It was you really need a team to translate effectively, and that's a whole other story. That got me interested already in school. I was being exposed to some of the classics. But the first reliable translation of a classic I was able to find was The Nanjing by Dr. Paul Unshold, which came out in 1987. I read it over and over and over again. And my original teacher, Michael Brofman, his teacher based everything he did on the Nanjing. And then I had a close colleague up in Evergreen, Colorado, in the foothills above Denver, who also was taught according to the Nanjing. And I also saw that a lot of the Japanese acupuncture approaches were based on Nanjing five-phase energetics, so to speak. So that piqued my interest. And eventually the Shanghanlun came out and better translations came. And I kept very close relationship with Paul Unschuld, which I maintain to these days. And he's translated all the essential acupuncture works.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, that's so important, right? Just that. And I think,
so when I turned 60 13 years ago, I informed Pacific College I needed to take a break from teaching. I wanted to focus on studying classics and also writing from it. So
yeah,
book.
so with your writings, A Ring Without End is your fourth book. Can you tell us about this work and about some of your previous books? Any new books that might be coming out that you want to share with us? Would love to learn more about that.
Okay. My first book came out 8 years ago. Excuse me. Still getting over this cold. We had a huge windstorm here the other night and I got caught in it. So, wind cold attack. It was called Returning to the Source. And it was a collection of essays that I'd written over a 10-year period based on the Nanjing, based on my understandings of the classical works and the need to base Chinese medicine education, at least partially, on the original texts and interpreting them and applying them to the problems of today. Because what I discovered was that these books were here and now relevant. There's a general attitude in the Western world, especially in the biomedical world, that the newest thing is the important thing. Oh, here's new research showing that this particular cell can influence uptake of dopamine in the morning kind of stuff, you know.
Right.
So, uh, and that's all good information. But the thing is that the paradigm of Western medicine is the same as it was in the late 19th century. You know, a disease model based on very specific approaches to science. My colleagues, Dr. Steve Cowan and I call it the engineering model. It has a tremendous breakdown of cells, parts, substances, structures, functions, et cetera, et cetera. But it's engineering. And engineering is not known from beginning from a more, for want of better, cosmic overview down to particulars. I always felt that that was missing.
Mhm.
So Chinese medicine provided a real complete view of the body, was also based on lifestyle, the importance of daily life. Because one of the things I learned over so many years of practice, it wasn't, I mean, it was often enough to put acupuncture needles in people. Like, you know, I had a lot of obstetric, birthing, postpartum work in my early days because my assistant was a midwife. And we'd have women beginning labor in my office, and then we follow up with them either at home or in the hospital, depending. And of course, that's all about timing and rhythm and so
Yeah.
forth, right? And so that taught me a lot working with those kind of people. But I found that many conditions, I always said that I specialized in autoimmune conditions, which is a very broad range, anything from allergies to lupus, all the way to patients with cancer. And that doesn't mean I treat cancer as a disease. It means I treat patients with
Yeah, of
if it's an appropriate case.
course.
Unfortunately, sometimes it's not. Um, but you have to have people need to change their lifestyles, how they eat, sleeping, exercise, all the things that naturopaths recommend to their clients, patients. I also do. And then they get to see gains and also then they own the treatment. They own what it does. Basically, what I see, especially with the acupuncture part of the practice, is that it changes the timing. It changes the circadian rhythms of the body using these various channel approaches, which I document some of my cases using these methods in the new book, A Ring Without End. And it's based on eight extraordinary vessel treatments, five-phase treatments, divergent channel treatments, et cetera, et cetera. And you see the results in the clinic because there's a palpable change in the chi of the room. Speaking of chi, right? and of the patient. They feel it. I feel it. And when that happens, I know it's been successful. But it's again, it's a step in a direction, right? It's not, oh, I'm treating asthma or I'm treating allergies or I'm treating this. It's I'm providing a space for the body to correct itself so it doesn't need to discharge through coughing, sneezing, et cetera, et cetera. So that's basically the gist of what I do. And so a lot of that is in that first book, Returning to the Source. But like I said, it was a collection of essays put into a whole. The second book was called Ripples in the Flow, and I'm still waiting to teach the material from it because it came out during COVID. And teaching pulse diagnosis requires you to be in a room with several people. So I did one workshop literally within a few weeks before the pandemic officially began. I gave the last presentation of that in Berkeley.
Wow.
And then since then, I haven't had a chance to teach that material, so I'm hoping to do it again soon. And that was based on the first 23 chapters of the Nanjing, which is really a pulse manual, an approach to what Paul Mitchell calls vessel diagnosis. The third book was about the importance, often overlooked in Chinese medicine, of ministerial fire, our natural warmth. Like I say in China, life is warm, death is cold. The first thing that happens is when a person dies, they turn blue and they become very, very, very cold. It's the warmth that keeps us alive. So maintaining and managing that ministerial fire is very, very important. So
Have you found just in with the changes in generations that there's been a change in that fire in some
in
way?
our culture,
Yeah.
well, it's funny. You read all the time in places like Instagram about how the Chinese never drink anything cold. Like,
Yes.
no no ice drinks. I mean, you could have something that's cool in a hot summer, but you'll find that interestingly enough, that in tropical cultures, they consume a lot less cold food and they actually consume warm spices and teas and things like that. So, because you lose that when you sweat, when the pores open, you lose a lot of that heat. The
Mhm.
body's trying to prevent excess heat, but at the same time, you have to retain the core heat that's in the dantian and the abdomen. Very, very important. And a lot of conditions, I'll give you an example of something that was totally upside down in TCM training in the West. Treating postpartum women with yin tonics, cooling, sticky, cloying herbs. It was seen as being yin deficiency. Only a very small percentage of symptomology associated with menopause, such as the hot flashes and the sweating, are caused by a yin vacuity. Most of the time, and if you check the pulse, it tends to be thready, depleted, deep. The abdomen tends to be cold or expanded or bloated, often with digestive problems. And the tongue is only red at the tip. The rest of the tongue is pale, swollen, and cold and damp. So what's happening is the weakening of the ministerial fire, which naturally happens at, say, 7 times 7 cycles. The Suen, the simple questions part of the Neijing, says that women change in 7-year cycles, men in 8-year cycles. So 49 more or less is when what the French call the change de vie, the change of life happens. It can happen earlier for some women, later for others. There's individual constitutional factors, the
Mhm.
climate where you live, lifestyle, diet, etc. But the ministerial fire weakens and floats, and it agitates the heart. There's two fires. There's the ministerial fire rooted between the kidneys and the abdomen. And then there's the heart fire, which is basically illumination, light. It's like the light of a candle that illuminates the room. But that ministerial fire comes and harasses the upper part of the body, causing agitation, disturbed sleep, emotional upset, and heat symptoms and sweating. But what needs to be done is not to just bury that fire in yin, but to strengthen that fire by bringing it back into the abdomen, descending it down and rooting it in the lower abdomen. And that requires using of warming herbs instead, which is counter to the what I consider to be Western thinking. And you know how that thinking got into Chinese medicine? During the 60s, um, Chinese Western doctors became aware of the ubiquitous hormonal therapy that was given to menopausal women here in America. Before the breast cancer scare, women were routinely recommended estradiol, estrogen, sometimes progesterone as well. And this is before bioidentical hormones, which are much more uh, compatible with the body. So they say, well, one of the herbs in this formula, it's called Liu Wei Di Huang, and six flavors Romania formula, which was actually a pediatric formula. It wasn't designed for adults from a physician named Chan Yi in the 12th century. He was a pediatrician. It was designed, it has one herb in it, which is called Shanyao or Dioscorea. So there's a Dioscorea in the same family in Mexico. I actually read the biography of the person who invented the birth control pill based on this, called Dioscorea villosa, and they used to use that in their herbal medicine. It's
Yeah.
different, but
Wild yam.
wild yam, yeah.
That's what we learned in naturopathic school.
So they
That
fractionalize the molecules to fix it, almost like making like a hydrogenated fat, like a butter, and turn that because it could be measured, it could be dosed in a certain way, and that became birth control pills and also HRT over time. So the Chinese said, well, no, this formula has Dioscorea in it also, and it also will increase the hormone supply along with these other yin herbs. So they were using actually Western thinking in Chinese medicine. Sometimes it's okay, but you have to be very careful with it. Another thing that happened was like adrenal insufficiency became kidney yang deficiency. They became equals. And again, they're not.
they're not.
We
Yeah.
did studies on that. And they gave kidney yang herbs to people with adrenal insufficiencies, and it didn't work as well as expected. So it's always it's not equals equals. It's there's always going to be
No,
subtle differences, you know.
it's interesting because I spent about 10 years working in Nicaragua
Wow.
in a small rural, mostly farming community there. And we ran naturopathic and mostly naturopathic and acupuncture clinics there within the Ministry of Health. But a
Beautiful.
lot of our local population, we would bring down students and doctors to do medical brigades in for natural medicine. And often, like we'd go and we'd always work in the fields with farmers, and we'd get back, and all of the students and docs would want to take a cold shower. And there was no hot water there, so of course it was like they immediately would want to go to take a cold shower because the heat. And all the locals were like, you cannot do, like, you're too hot. You need hot coffee or hot tea. And they would encourage them to take hot things, or they would serve hot soup on the hottest days. And there were just so many interesting parallels with just heat and cold to Chinese medicine. And I think you can find that in many cultures around the world.
I once took out of the UCSD, UC San Diego library an incredible Aztec materia medica with original illustrations and everything. And they used also a hot cold medicine, elements, and
Yes,
combined herbs and formulas in a very similar way.
interesting.
The sad thing, like with native medicine in the Americas, is that since it wasn't a primarily literate culture like the Chinese, it wasn't written down. And that we've lost a lot of the Native American in this country uh, medical teachings as well because they were passed on through lineage and through father, son, mother, daughter, and we lost a lot of it. Whereas in China, I mean, you've got like 80,000 books in most TCM school libraries, you know.
Yeah, it's really prolific
Yeah.
over there.
And which is why I chose Chinese medicine, even though I studied naturopathic medicine and, you know, Greek or Arabic and Jewish medicine and so forth. And, I have some knowledge of world medicine because the Silk Road, that era was the original integrative medicine. Persian physicians were communicating with Egyptian physicians, with Tibetan and Chinese physicians and with Ayurvedic medicine. One of my medical heroes, also I consider my rabbi, Maimonides, he got medicines from India because his brother was a trader to India. So he used their medicines in his practice in Egypt, of all places. So,
Well, you had just mentioned Native Americans and just touched on a little bit the elements of Mother Earth. And so I'm curious to ask you just about Chinese ecological medicine and what that is, and how you see its role in modern medicine and daily life.
well, I came up with the idea. Well, it's not original idea, of course, but just the term Chinese ecological medicine because I there was always a quandary among students and recent graduates. Well, what am I offering to the public? Am I just doing a Me Too thing, like a quote unquote integrative medicine thing where, oh yeah, we also treat patients with this. Oh yeah, we also treat patients with that. No, we are providing an alternative. I like the term alternative medicine much better than integrative medicine. Not that I don't feel like there is great, potential and room for interactivity between health professions. But there was a famous homeopath who I'm sure you know, Harris Coulter. He wrote a
Yes,
book
of
called Dividing
course.
Legacy, and I love those books. And he said, the question here is, and he wrote this like in the 60s, who's doing the integrating and
Correct.
who's going to be calling the shots?
Yeah.
And that includes theoretical foundations of what it is you're practicing. And you see this again. I think acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine are great tools for example, fertility clinics, which is in some ways a modern problem based on our lifestyle, career, and so forth, et cetera, et cetera. But to reduce it to just protocols, use these points on the third day after implantation, use this 30, it gives you a guideline. But if you stick rigidly to that without using your diagnostic tools, your results will not be as good. I will own that and say that very, strongly. So what I would tell students is that we're teaching a different type of medicine because, a colleague of mine, Ken Rose, once said, um, if the earth is sick, how can humanity be well? We have to heal the earth if we want to heal humanity. And as you know, we're being poisoned everywhere we go. And like one of the illnesses that I work with is so-called Parkinson's disease. I've never seen one case that remotely resembles another one, by the way. Every case is totally unique. So it's just a catch-all name, just like many other disease names that we see. We have to deconstruct them and treat the actual person with the symptoms at the stage that they're at, in the constitution that they have. And so there is an ecology of the human mind and body, but that human mind and body ecology is resonant with the ecology of our planet, its seasons, its lunar cycles, solar cycles. And as they say in Ayurvedic medicine, the thing that brings down a civilization is impure air, impure water, and impure soil. And we now have all those.
That's
And of
right.
course, um, you and I may be eating really well, but most of America is still eating a junk diet compared to the rest of the world. We're now 39th in world health in the United States.
Yeah.
Unacceptable for such a wealthy nation to be so unhealthy.
Yeah, it's so unacceptable and it's just getting worse, honestly. I think that when you look at many of the different professions, and obviously, certainly Ch Chinese medicine has one of the longest histories.
Yeah.
But I think that many are struggling with this dichotomy between the way that is getting implemented into a system that is then reducing it to protocols and that is not like when you look at root cause medicine, it's
Yes.
it's very different. It's a very different approach.
Yeah. It takes time spending time with people too. And I think that's where some of the problem is that most modern medical clinics are trying to stuff as many patients as fast as they can. And they're just looking at the chart, not looking at the person. So you got to stamp it, give this medication, do this, we'll do this, sir. It's that kind of system is like counterproductive to what it is we're trying to do with the medicine. But of course, economically, financially, we have to find workarounds so we can survive while doing that. So what I often will tell graduating students is, if you have to take that job at the fertility clinic or in a chiropractic office or medical office, do it, but make sure you have time for a private practice. Dedicate at least 1 or 2 days a week to seeing your own patients on your own time so you don't lose touch with that type of medicine, which is the original form of medicine that the Chinese practiced, or
Yes,
one of the forms that they
beautiful.
practiced.
Great advice. So, maybe I can ask you a little bit about your new book and, what chronobiology is. I'm so interested in this concept.
Well, my new partner in crime, so to speak, is Dr. Stephen Gowan, and he studied Western medicine in Italy, and we both grew up in New York, and we're close in age to each other. And he got a hold of me through my second book, which was Ripples in the Flow, and he had a copy written with his notes and Chinese characters all over it. And I ran into him at a symposium here from one of our former students, Moshe Heller, who has a pediatric clinic in New York. And Stephen's specialty was pediatrics, and he walked away from a huge practice, thousands of patients, about 20, 25 years ago, and immersed entirely into Chinese medicine. He already was deeply involved with Qigong and so forth. And so he came from that. It's rare to find a physician who completely immerses in Chinese medicine and basically leaves Western medicine behind, but not the information of it. Of course, he still uses that. So we first collaborate on this book that's out now, A Ring Without End, which is basically 4 books in one, by the way. And it's very information dense. So as our editor puts at the very beginning of the book, please take your time with it, take it off into the forest, sit down and read a section. Don't try to read it all through one sitting. It's
Mm.
just too much material. It's a book that's going to stay with people, hopefully for the long term. So, especially starting with COVID, but it's always been my interest going way back. But I see that there's a new field that's developing now. I was already getting journals on Western chronobiology coming out of Houston, as it turns out, out of hospitals there, 30 years ago. They had like subscription journals on chronobiology. And basically, what they were finding that if you administered, medications, i.e., chemotherapy, insulin, et cetera, at a certain time of day, you could reduce the dosage and get more effectiveness. Whereas another time of day, if you administered the same drug, that it would not be taken up as well, and you need to use a larger dose at the risk of side effects, et cetera, et cetera. So that was like an early expression in the West of the importance of the timing. And
Yes.
now, of course, we have an epidemic of insomnia and have more than half of my patients have sleep issues. And I personally had recent sleep issues. About 6 months ago, um, I was asked to teach a seminar in New York, where my daughter and grandkids live, and my son-in-law, and also do a book signing at the big Chinese herb pharmacy in the East Coast called Kamwa. And about 36 to 48 hours before the seminar, I fell and broke both my wrists. And I was in a cast on both arms. Fortunately, I could still use my fingers, but I did the seminars and did the book signing. I mean, I don't know what people thought. So I had to get surgery on the wrist, obviously, because of broken bones. So I decided to do it back in San Diego. So I flew back. But after the surgery, I had anesthesia. It threw my sleep cycles completely
Mm,
off. It would take me 4 to 5 hours to fall asleep.
wow.
So it refocused my attention. How do I get back? I knew about melatonin and CBD and these various substances, but even with those things, there was timing that was necessary. Dosages, you don't want to go basically above 2 to 3 milligrams of melatonin. The
Mhm.
time you take it will determine how well you fall asleep. It only works for 2 to 3 hours. How do you follow that up? And Started using Linger reishi, a special concentrated extract. That really helped me a lot. But using acupuncture, using qigong, getting up early in the morning, going out into the sun, which sets your melatonin cycle for the day. Slowly, I was able to regain my normal sleep doing that. So it's very, very important because there's a new science in the West called glymphatics, where the brain discharges waste products while you sleep. All these waste fluids come down and drain out of your body. So if you don't get proper sleep, that doesn't happen. There are all these repair mechanisms in the body, not just with the brain, with the liver, the kidneys, et cetera, that are require deep, good quality sleep to do so. It's a very important part of healing practice. So that refocused myself on this. And so I started again studying in the Chinese medical classics and saying, well, how do we take this information, what's known as Wu Yun Liu Qi, five movements, six Qi, and apply it to the greatly disturbed circadian crisis that we're seeing today. And jet lag's the least of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think also we're seeing this, in kids. I mean, ever since the iPhones became, part of our actual extensions of our
Oh, yeah.
bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, kids now are just not sleeping. They're just not. And
The
it's
blue
it's
light aspect of it, and it's known that blue light evening. There's a number of researchers of what's known as circadian biology, who are also making an emphatic, strong case for restoring the normal pattern of the day and being careful with screens and getting early morning sunlight, keeping the house dim. I've taken out all the fluorescent lighting out of my bathroom in the house, and we keep our lights low and only amber light in the evenings, things like that. And it may make a difference. Makes
so
a
we can learn more about that in your new book then,
when
yes?
it comes, yeah, maybe another year or two. So
Okay.
you'll, there's plenty of material in our Ring Without End to keep busy, including there is a chapter. This is the book, by the way, on circadian. So there's a nice introductory chapter I wrote here. If you want, I'll read a little quote from it.
That would be lovely.
Let's see, where is it? Circadian. Are we going to have time for audience questions as
Yeah,
well?
we have about 10 minutes left and be happy to take questions.
I see there's quite a few of them in the
Yeah,
chats.
there's about 7 questions.
All right, let's see now. Yeah, there's a lot of circadian material in this book as well, so that no one has to hold their breath. There's different maps and
And is there a best way for us to buy your book, Zeb, if we're wanting to get
well,
it?
it's on.
Is it
If you
best
don't
to
want to,
go?
it is on Amazon, and they of course they printing it for us. This is my first book that is a how would you say self-published. We started a new publication group called the Ring Collective.
Beautiful. Great.
The
Well,
other
then
books
we can.
are published through Singing Dragon. But Singing Dragon has cut back on publishing alternative medicine books recently. At least that's the impression I got. I don't want to diss them in any way, but they didn't want to take any more books from me. So, but that led to publishing our own books. Sorry, I'm having, you would think I would memorize. Here we go. If you get the books on page 135, and then this beautiful maps from Nanjing 23. So I'm going to read from Su Wen 26, Bajang Shenming Lun, the section, uh, all laws of piercing, i.e. acupuncture, require an observation of the chi of sun, moon, and stars, the eight cardinal turning points of the four seasons. When heaven is warm and sun is bright, blood in humanity is rich and fluid, and the defense chi is at the surface. When heaven is cold and sun hidden, like right now, the blood congeals, its flow is impeded, and the defense chi that prevents you from getting sick is
Mm.
also deeper, so it's easier to get ill. The position of the chi is determined in view of the luminaries in heaven, moving the position of their light. That's both solar and lunar, and also influence from constellations. Um, I'll give you an example from from modern science. There's a scientist who wrote a book. His name is Shubin, Shubin. I'm trying to remember the title of the book, but he said that the gravitational field of Jupiter, which is the largest planet in our solar system, is so great that it has a strong influence on Earth. He said that if Jupiter was further away in its orbit, that human beings would be less influenced by that pull, and the average height would be 4 feet. If Jupiter was closer in its orbit to Earth, its pull, gravitational pull would be stronger, and human beings would be 7 to 8 feet. So the planets themselves have a very strong influence on our structure as human beings. So, and of course, in Chinese medicine, going back to Han Dynasty, we talk about heaven, humanity, and earth, that humanity is a conduit between heaven and earth. And if we live according to the laws of the heavens and of the earth, we will be healthy and the planet will be healthy. If we violate those laws, for example, the fossil fuel business, by extracting fossil fuels, which are like the essence, the jing of the earth, compressed plant, animal material underneath the ground. And then we liberate it quickly, turn it into fire, goes up into the atmosphere. The earth gets colder and colder and less fertile, and the air becomes warmer and hotter. I mean, so just a basic law of physics. There's no political thing about it. It's just you have to be very careful when you're using these deep resources that the earth provides for us. So, and that's I talk about that also in the Afterglow book. There's a whole section on the whole problem of fossil fuels. Of According to Li Shizhen, who's one of the great Chinese authors of the Bunzhao Gongmu, the classified materia medica, there's yin and yang fire of heaven, yin and yang fire of humanity, yin and yang fire of earth. And the yin fire of earth is fossil fuels. So
Great.
there's a whole discussion on that. Okay.
So I could ask some of these questions if you like.
The last person who asked a question, they want to email me. Feel free to share my email address. In fact, I'll put it here. I will send them a list of resources, so I'm going to type it in now.
Okay, wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Sev.
It may take a little time, a few days or a week or two, but I'll be glad to do it. Okay, there it is.
Great.
So that's for
The book on Chinese medicine.
Hustle 2098 Faith. Okay. So
Great.
just
So,
email me and I'll send you some resources. I don't think we have time for that now.
so I think what book on Chinese medicine is recommended. So maybe that also, if you, Suli, if you want to email, um, Zev, then you can get those resources as well from him. So another question is, please explain the five element theory, the creative and destructive cycle.
Oh, that's a whole
That-
class.
That's a whole class. That's a whole semester, right?
Well, let's just say that it's a medical theory of relationships. And all traditional medical systems had either a 4 element system or a 5 element system or a phase. Element, it's not element in the terms of like your elemental chart of, zirconium and titanium, et cetera, et cetera. It's not those kind of elements. It's elemental forces that help shape the universe. But their interaction can either be a creative one or a destructive one. And that's why they talk about in terms of like mother and child, brother, sister, so forth. It really is about a familial relationship. And in the Nanjing, they talk about in terms of the relationship of the internal organs and their associated channels. When they work together, there's health. But if they start to oppose or attack each other, if one's too strong, it weakens another one. So a lot of people are liver replete or liver excess. And when the liver is too overactive, too strong, it tends to suppress digestion. It can affect heart rhythm and it can drain the kidneys. That's one example of many in terms of 5 phase dynamics. It's fascinating stuff. And you can
Beautiful.
change that with acupuncture, with lifestyle recommendations, body work, herbal medicine, diet, all kinds of applications to that theory. So,
So we have another question coming in from Roger. He says, Hey Zev, Dr. Roger Janke, OMD
hi.
here.
Hey,
Uh,
Rod.
would you talk a bit about the view of immortality in Chinese medicine, Yang Sheng, and Taoism? Thanks for all that you've contributed.
Well, Roger, I'm not like you, an expert in Taoist thought. I do read the philosophical classes, but my orientation is that in order to understand Chinese medicine, quoting Dr. Zhang Jingyue, the great Ming Dynasty physician, you need to understand the underlying philosophy. And he claims that the I Ching is the underlying philosophical foundation of Chinese medicine. So I've been dutifully studying that since I was 15 years old. I can't say I understand it all. I don't have a mathematical mind, so it's not easy for me. But I get what I do have a good brain for pattern identification and thinking. I do not have a good mind for mathematical equations, unfortunately. And there's a lot of mathematics in the I Ching. Um, Taoism, again, I read Lao Tzu, Chuangzi, and a lot of the theory and I find very inspirational. I do practice Qigong every day now. I was a yogi for many, many years. I still do some yoga, but especially now with my wrist still healing, I've been doing less yoga poses, much more Qigong probably did more than anything else to help heal my wrist and bring me back to a normal state of health, I would say. Because I've really experienced moving Qi through the body and letting self-repair mechanisms and also harmonizing myself with heavenly and earth Qi. As far as immortality goes, I read immortality as longevity.
Hmm.
I don't think anyone can dispute that all human beings die. And reincarnation, I believe is a definite realm of possibility. But since I haven't been there, I'm still in this world, I can't say for sure. I tend to feel like you just don't come back, Helena Troy comes back as, Madonna or something like that. I think it's more like we're recombinant DNA of souls, something like that, so that human beings are constantly new and exciting and innovative and different. It's not just the same recycling over and over again. So that's my view on that. But I never felt that I was going to try to live forever. And I certainly wouldn't take Cinnabar or Zusha or something like that to try to do it because many people poison themselves to death. But again, that's a real value judgment. And you may have similar or differing views on that. And that's worthy of discussion sometime.
So we only have 1 minute left, so I do want to respect your time. I know there's some more
We can
questions.
go over.
Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
a
great.
little over.
So Donna Hood is asking if you could speak about the role of grief, a broken heart, and then the lung, large intestine, the element of metal, letting go, separation, and autoimmune disease.
Woo. Another huge,
Another.
another seminar, maybe a week long one. Um, I would say, in Chinese medicine, we have what are known as the Wuzhi, the five minds. In other words, the souls, the personalities associated with the internal organs. There are seven emotions, and each of them have a very specific effect on our internal health. Anyone knows when you have a panic attack or fear, sudden fear or fright, that urination increases, you sweat more, the heartbeat speeds up, the intestines loosen up. There are all these physiological reactions to emotional stressors like this. And some people, with their work and lifestyle or relationships, they're under constant stress. And what happens is that there's eventually a system breakdown. So we can use the Chinese medical teachings to understand where these emotions go, which organs are impaired, and then correct that with our various tools, acupuncture, herbal medicine, but also emotional, psychological support. There are several systems of therapy that are very useful. A Western one I like a lot is cognitive therapy, where you hold a mirror to the patient and they get to see themselves in a new and more innovative light. Or there are also Eastern therapies or meditation techniques that work with these things. There's um, Wang Feng Wang Fengyi, I think his name is, yeah. He had a system of using the emotions, purging them to clear physiological disorders. Wang Fengyi. And Sabina Films was a close friend of mine. She's published books on this method. And so there's all kinds of techniques emotionally that we can also use to clear these problems. I tend to associate the lung, large intestine with melancholic. I know whenever my lungs get affected, um, it's not that I'm, depressed, God forbid. There's like a sadness, like a woe is me. You get very reflective and you're looking back. You're not looking forward. So when the lung chi is not functioning well, you tend to become very nostalgic. That's the way I would put it. Whereas with healthy lungs, you you're projecting forward what's next. Of course, the ideal is to be centered here and now, being able to reflect back and move forward at the same time. So,
Beautiful. So we have three questions in here about your thoughts on red light therapy in general or for helping reset circadian rhythm.
I've become recently aware of it, and it's very important. I think it's great stuff, especially for neurological disorders such as Parkinson's. Um, the red light therapy is very good for resetting brain signaling and central nervous system. It's just phenomenal and very exciting. So I have a very strong interest in it. But it's relatively new to me, so I'm in my research uh, mode at the moment. But there are a number of tools, like I see, like they're like little red lights you can keep in your room or office in the evening to use that instead. Also, use of amber light in the evenings is much better. The worst thing is like very bright LEDs or especially fluorescent lighting. That will definitely disrupt sleep rhythms. So
Right.
that's at least an introduction to the subject. But yes, I think it's very important. Also, red light saunas, red
Yes.
infrared saunas are very useful tools as well.
Great. There's a question about how long you should stare at the sun to set your melatonin cycle.
I could, I wouldn't suggest staring at it.
Yes, I wouldn't suggest that
But what
either.
I do, I wear glasses and they're progressive lenses, but I take them off in the morning. I don't look directly into the sun,
Right.
but I let it hit my face so that some of the light gets into my eyes. And also I go to a lot of sunsets out here at Torrey Pines Beach and
Yeah, beautiful.
watch it go down, but I don't just stare into it. I just let
Yeah.
the light influence my entire thing because also your arms, where most of the major acupuncture points are, and the legs below the knees, though those are where by the way, the five phase points called the Wushu Shui in the Nanjing are located. By exposing them to the light as well, you get a major input of very healing and healthy chi. So,
Great. And we have one last question from Jasmine Shoshana. If you remove dampness from the body via moxa, isn't that creating a really good space for the body to heal?
oh yeah, of course, it's totally situationally dependent. The right patient at the right time, and then the right dosage.
Yes.
How many boxes you use with needles, how many needles you use, what gauge you use, the depth that you needle to, how long you leave the needles in, all have to be considered. It's like really like cooking. You have your ingredients, but then you have to decide, are you going to marinate them? Are you going to add
Yeah.
salt? Are you going to cook them with oil or not? What kind of flame are you going to use? What kind of cooking vessel? All these things have to be considered in order to make a meal. So similar thought goes behind preparing herbal formulas and acupuncture moxa treatments.
Wonderful. Well, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts before I close out the webinar today, but this has just been just such a treat.
Well,
Really
great fun. It's wonderful to meet you
great
as
fun.
well.
Yes.
And I hope Shamini is doing well. I know she has a family situation now. And so closing thoughts, stay in touch. I have a website, I'm on Instagram, and you can contact me by email with specific questions if you have. And I'm interested in knowing all about all of you on here. It's been wonderful to speak to you. And thank you
Yes.
for putting up with my cold.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, it was just really just we're so honored to have you and to have
It's
your
an honor to
time
be here.
talking to our lovely community and you've really
I'd like to
given.
know more about your community. I know Shamini for many years, but I didn't realize the scope of Chi. So
Yes, I mean the Consciousness and Healing Initiative is really a, group of practitioners and scientists, artists, creatives, patients that really believe in
as Mr.
consciousness and
Spock,
healing
you
and biofield approaches
your
to.
biofield is very important stuff.
Right.
Well, as Mr. Spock used to say, live long and prosper. And I think we're heading into a time of great change. When things get dark like this, when things get really threatening, things tend to shift in new directions and new possibilities come in. So hope
Yes,
that's going to be the case. All right.
very cool.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
again.
And by the
And
way,
for
do I
the
get a copy of this or
yes, we'll get that to
I'll
you,
post it
Zeb.
on my website and also be good
Wonderful.
spreading the word about your group as well.
And for those of you who are here, we will send out an email. We do a webinar replay. So if you weren't able to attend today, or you came late, or had to leave early, or you want to share it, you'll get that email tonight, and we'll replay it tomorrow. Also, so look for that email, and then we'll see you all soon. Have a lovely, lovely evening and weekend. And again, Zev Rosenberg, thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. Give me one second. I'm just copying all the text from the chat.
Oh yeah, we can download it for you and send
Okay,
you.
thank you.
If you click the three tiny dots at the
Ah,
bottom next to the
if they keep
smile,
changing with Zoom, I can't keep up with all the changes. Let's see.
yes, I'll send you the chat. Don't you worry.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks again,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.